Okay, Madam Host,
Right, are you ready?
there you go.
Okay, so Guy has given me the honor of hosting you this evening, serving as the host for this conversation. So I want to first take an opportunity to welcome everyone to this call. We are delighted to have our sister city family from South Berwick, Maine with us, and lots of people from around the Tuskegee diaspora. And oh my God, I see Charlene Upshaw Weaver. I'm not going to get excited, but I'm just grateful that you're here, Charlene. Thank you for being here. So
And
the
thank you so
Tuskegee
much for inviting
diaspora
me.
is in the house, as well as some folk on the ground here in Tuskegee. So we are just delighted that Guy has had he's always got all these bright ideas that are always just right on time. So you are blessed to be at the inaugural session for the Voices of Greenwood series that will be recorded for all posterity so that we can keep our story alive and well. So in that spirit, I just want to give thanks to the creator for allowing us to be here and for having this wonderful, wonderful gathering of people. And Guy has given me a protocol. So my first duty is to let everyone know that the One Tuskegee concept is alive and well. So we are One Tuskegee, the university, the community, and we are delighted about that. And in that spirit, I am going to introduce to you the department head at the Robert R. Taylor School of Architecture at Tuskegee University, someone that I have known since his undergraduate days at Tuskegee. He is a son of Mother Tuskegee. I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Kwesi Daniels to you to bring some greetings.
Good evening, everyone. It's always a pleasure to be among family. And it's an honor to be able to represent Tuskegee and the Robert R. Taylor School on this call. I was unfortunately won't be able to stay on long. I'm actually traveling with our students right now and some faculty and staff. We're currently at MIT at Robert R. Taylor's home school. Building bridges between Tuskegee and MIT and creating opportunities for our students. So, and you know, of course, the university as a whole. So, but when some people call, you answer, and so I got the call, and I'm here, and I'm just really, really honored to be able to bring greetings to everyone on the call.
Thank you so much, Dr. Daniels. And so I guess I should let you know that I am Norma McGowan Jackson, native of Tuskegee and the village of Greenwood in particular. Also a daughter of Mother Tuskegee and currently serving this district as the council person for the city of Tuskegee. So I should have done that first. But I am now going to introduce someone that none of you needs an introduction to. Someone who is just an amazing part of the fabric of this community, someone who always is looking for ways to lift our story, to make our story visible to the world, because it is such a vast and beautiful story. And so I'm going to give the microphone now to Mr. Guy Trammell, who will then introduce our premier visitor for the evening, someone that I am just learning. And I am so delighted that she is going to be sharing with us, but I'm going to turn the mic over to Guy and he'll tell you a little bit more about our first guest speaker for Voices of Greenwood.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. And I say thank everybody for coming on. This will be, again, a series to really tell the stories of the village of Greenwood. And they're so amazing, and how they've actually affected the world. And so, you know, thank you for being a part of this. And we will have this archived on YouTube. We'll make sure to send a link out to everyone. But I'm just so delighted for this. This has been kind of a few years coming. And I'd like to introduce to you someone who and present to others for the first time the person who's actually not a guest, but actually she's home right here. She's Tuskegee home, and she had achieved the status and blazed new trails all over. She continues to do that as the highest ranking African American in the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And she actually produced things just like Kim Burns, The Civil War, Where in the World's Carmen Sandiego, and I Love You, You Love Me, Barney. And so, but she went on to actually work with the Drum and Spear bookstore, amazing, blazing new territory for African American and Native American and Hispanic American literature, and a gathering place for people, and on and on. She actually had her own production company to produce an incredible series on Africa and so much more, and continually to speak and everything, and just again open doors for not just young women, but just people in general, across the country and around the world. But today we're not going to focus on that part. We're actually hopefully bring her back to talk about those things. But when she actually got started in Tuskegee as a student, and want to kind of take the focus all the way back to that and tell some stories that a lot of people don't know about what took place there, the transformative part. So I'd like to present to some and introduce to others the most amazing, wonderful, again, another sister, part of our family, and that's Jennifer Lawson. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. It's my pleasure, my honor to be here. I have a little bit of laryngitis, but so if you can't hear me clearly, please just let me know. Before Dr. Daniels leaves, I just want to tell him that one of the honors that I had during my public television days was to help launch the film about the architect Paul Williams.
Oh, wow.
Yes, so
Wow.
and so that was a real pleasure to help then make sure that that film, Hollywood's Architect, would tell the story of that prominent Black architect.
Well, thank you. For those who don't know, Black architects are not widely recognized. We just have the honor of knowing, one of the greatest with Robert R. Taylor, and having paved the way in transforming our community. But most don't know who we are. So, Ms. Lawson, thank you as an architect. Thank you for celebrating that history and making sure the world knows who we are.
Well, the work that you do is transformative. It is so important. One only needs to be here in Washington, D.C. and see the National Museum of African American History and Culture to know that, or to go to Ghana and see the works of people there going not just for the present, but all the way back to Max Bond and others. And so it's quite remarkable. And there's such a rich history of Black history and Black architectural connections. And so I praise what you do, and I'm thrilled to be here in your presence. Now,
well, if I can just add one last piece, since you mentioned, Mr. J. Max Bond. For those who don't know, he is actually was a son of Tuskegee as well, through his father.
Yes.
His father was a professor on campus, and he went on to be one of the most prominent African American architects and one of the architects of the African American Museum. So yes, it's a beautiful thing.
Oh, the Tuskegee community is a very tight one, but we're very inclusive of Maine as well.
It's beautiful, beautiful.
I'd like to start by going back in time, but I promise you I won't stay all the way back in time, because what I'd really like this evening is to have a conversation with you. I'd like for all of us to be a part of a conversation together. I'd like to hear your questions, respond to those, I'd like to learn more about what you're planning to do with Greenwood, because it also relates to something that's very near and dear to my heart, and that's the work that I'm doing now. So that'll be the part when I come up to the present, when I talk about that. But just to get us started, I'd like to start 60 years ago. It's amazing to me to think that it was 60 years ago in 1963 when I first set foot on Tuskegee's campus. And when I then walked through Greenwood and all of the other places around Tuskegee and began to learn this incredible community. So in 1963 was a pivotal time too. I mean, I'm sure that if we think back, this was a time when Martin Luther King wrote his letter from Birmingham jail. After he wrote that letter, he wrote that in April. In May of that same year, I was 16 years old, and a group of us in high school heard Reverend Bevel's and also heard the disc jockey, Shelley the Playboy, who was one of our favorite disc jockeys, make the call for young people to come and join in the civil rights movement and support Dr. King. Our parents said, no, absolutely not. The principal of our high school, no, absolutely not. You'll be expelled from school if you dare go downtown Birmingham. And we couldn't resist. We felt that it was time. It was time for things to change, particularly in a city like Birmingham, which we nicknamed Bombingham. And we called it Bombingham because really there were many people's homes, like Arthur Shores, an attorney whose home had been bombed several times. Prominent Black families had their homes bombed. Jewish families were attacked there. Birmingham was an awful place. And so we decided that no, it is time for us to take a stand. So in 1963, 16 years old, with my friends who were similar ages and younger, we started marching. We left school, we defied the principal, we defied our parents and started marching. We were arrested before we arrived in downtown Birmingham, which was good for our health because that was where they were. The police, Bull Connor, was attacking people with the dogs, with attack dogs, German Shepherds, and fire hoses. And so we were spared that because they arrested us before we could even get down there and put us in the fairgrounds with a large number of people. That was my introduction to civil rights. The adults who condemned us for participating, a few days later, they praised us. They told us that they were proud of us. They told us that we had been brave and they wished that they had been braver in some cases.
Yeah. In the commentary, he also talked about the author.
Guy, if you would mute everybody except our speaker. I think that's, yeah, there you go.
Okay, because if anybody has a question, please feel free to raise the question though. I'm happy to make it a dialogue. But we then decided that we would continue. And so we continued with marching and with demonstrating and supporting Dr. King. So that was how 1963 began in my world. It became even more dramatic, however, because then you also had in 1963 the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, where 4 little girls were killed and over 40 people were injured. You know, that's another example of what I meant by Bombingham. Shortly, I now had gone to Tuskegee. I graduated high school in Fairfield, Alabama, and went to Tuskegee. And shortly after I arrived at Tuskegee, I'm walking across the campus in November, mid-November, beautiful campus, a lovely, tranquil day, with all of the greenery that the Tuskegee campus has. And suddenly, for the first time in my life, I hear a collective scream. I've never heard anything like that in my life before. I mean, it was just deafening. From every quarter of the campus, I hear this scream. And I'm wondering, what has happened? It's like the world has come to an end or something. I see people running towards the dormitory. I run towards the dormitory as well. I get there, and that normally in those days, there would always be a group of sisters who would sit in front of the one TV set in the dormitory to watch their soap opera. And they were there crowded around the TV, and they were crying. This was not a soap opera. They were there because the news had just been announced that John Kennedy had been assassinated. And at first, when I first heard the news, they said, the president's been killed, the president's been killed. And I thought, who would want to kill the president of Tuskegee? I didn't realize that they were talking about the assassination at first of the president of the United States. So that became another one of those defining moments of 1963. We had another one that I neglected to mention, which was incredibly important, was in August, however. And that predated the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church. And that was the glorious moment when Martin Luther King spoke in Washington, D.C., on the National Mall in front of the Lincoln Memorial, where he gave one of his most famous speeches. And I encourage people to listen to many of his other speeches as well, because while that one was monumental, he really was such an orator and gave many, many incredible speeches. And his words are still ring true today and have so much meaning, even right to this particular moment. In 1964, we became in the summer of 64, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee started working in Mississippi with Freedom Summer. And Dean Bertram Phillips of Tuskegee was very, very supportive of us students who were student activists. I had become a known rabble rouser at Tuskegee after I arrived there. And Dean Phillips was very supportive. He encouraged us, he supported us. SNCC came through the campus to recruit students to go to Mississippi to help register people to vote there. I had learned about the importance of the vote from Dr. Gomillion there in Tuskegee. And it was fascinating. He even invited me to his house several times to meet with him, where he then was schooling me really about the importance of the vote. And it was a wonderful experience. And I also learned about Ms. Maddox and other people who then were really doing wonderful things, both in the Tuskegee community and even when they were outside of the Tuskegee community. They were advocates and doing things for Tuskegee. People like Doris Mitchell, who was, I mean, you talking about a role model. I mean, my God, this woman was in her Paris fashions, driving her Daimler Benz around Tuskegee, hanging out with her good pals, Odetta and other great singers and people. But Doris and others would invite us over to her home to have meetings and to talk. I mean, I can't say enough about the warmth and the welcoming of people in Tuskegee. And it wasn't just for us who were in the movement, but it was for other students as well. There were faculty members who were equally kind, generous of their time, and who were really trying to make sure we understood our heritage and the role we could play in this country. Antoinette Handy was another one of those people. She was a music professor, but I could be here all night with the list of people who were wonderful mentors and great professors and who really guided us. But I would go back to Dean Phillips for arranging transportation for us, a group of students, to go over to Mississippi to work with the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, Fannie Lou Hamer, Bob Moses, Stokely Carmichael, Cortland Cox. So we worked with them to really go canvassing in Jackson, Mississippi, Hinds County, and other places to get out the vote. That was a political education for me, and it set a tone for things that would happen later in my life. When I came back to Tuskegee, I felt, okay, people there couldn't vote, and we were working to help them get to vote. What are we doing here? Right here in Macon County, Bullock County, Lowndes County, Dallas County, Wilcox County, the entire Black Belt of Alabama. It was a shame. It was a shame. And we began to leave campus when we had spare time. We then, instead of pledging sororities and fraternities, we would end up out in the countryside, going door to door, shack to shack, out in the fields, the cotton fields and other fields, to ask people if they would consider registering to vote. And that was an incredible education for me, an incredible education. By that time in my life, I had read Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. And when I read the book, the first time I read it, I thought it was fiction. By the time I was at Tuskegee and seeing some of the things that I was seeing in the rural parts of Macon County, I began, and Lowndes County and other places, I began to realize, no, there's a lot of reality in that book. There's a lot that's really there. And the way in which he talked about the ambiguity of the gesture of the statue on Tuskegee's campus, of whether he's lifting the veil of ignorance or covering it, covering the poor man, is something that has stuck with me to this day. But it was, but reading things like that, learning about Macon County, learning about the Black Belt of Alabama, was a turning point in my life, really a turning point. And that came to, I started more and more leaving campus. I had gone to school with the idea of becoming a doctor. I was planning to go pre-med, and so I was taking courses. I got into an honors program at Tuskegee and was given the privilege of going to courses in the School of Veterinary Medicine in the grads program. It was wonderful. So I took parasitology and several other courses. I did internships at the hospital at Tuskegee. I was having the time of my life. In the summers, I worked at the Sloan Kettering Memorial Center in New York City in cancer research, and worked in a lab there and learned even more. And so I felt I'm on my way to a medical career. However, back at Tuskegee, I began to have doubts about whether that was the logical path for me at that time for my future. And that came to a head for me in 1966, in the early part of the year, when my dear and beloved classmate, Sammy Young Jr., was murdered. I could not believe that this was happening to us at Tuskegee, in the community of Tuskegee, that a young Black man could be shot down in cold blood like this, and his murderer could be acquitted so quickly, and that there was the question of justice, the question of what does it mean to try to be a doctor and to help our people if we can't even survive, if we can't even walk the streets and live, if you can't even go into a gas station and come out alive. So that was a turning point for me. Sammy's death affected me very much. And I felt that no, it was time to leave school and work full time for civil rights. And this was a very, very, very big decision for me, because I came from a family where my father had a third grade education, had worked his way up through the coal mines in the Birmingham, Fairfield area, started his own business, but didn't have money to send me and my brothers to college. And so I had to work in order to find a way to finance my education. I was very fortunate and got a full scholarship, the Gorgas Scholarship, a state scholarship. It was done on a discriminatory basis. The white student who won the state fair, the science fair, could go to any university, like the University of Alabama or Auburn. The Black student who won could go to any Black school in Alabama. And I chose Tuskegee. I was very honored to win, and I chose Tuskegee, and that provided me with then the wherewithal to attend school. But now here I am at Tuskegee, and I am sitting there in Dean Phillips' office thinking about giving all of that up. I didn't have the money to go back to school. I knew I would have to start all over again, figuring out a way that I could go back to school. And I loved my education. I loved the courses at Tuskegee. I wanted to continue that. But I felt, no, this is a time it's important to take a stand and to do something. And this is the most meaningful thing that I could do with my life at this moment. Sammy had made the greatest sacrifice. My sacrifice would be a small one. I was going to work full time with SNCC. So I left, I got my backpack, I got a sleeping bag, and I moved to Lowndes County and started living in basically a small house with about 6 other people, guys and women. And we then were sleeping. Sometimes we'd have to move our mattresses and move our sleeping bags because the roof was leaking. During the winter, it was cold because there was one little wood burning stove that kept the place warm, but it sufficed. And the people of Lowndes County, the Jackson family in particular, and other families there, were incredible in keeping us safe, in keeping us fed, in providing us with fuel. They had their own gas pump. They provided us with gas so that we could travel around the county. I did that kind of work in both Wilcox County and Lowndes County. In Wilcox County, I had the privilege of working with a group of families in Gee's Bend. And Gee's Bend is now world famous for their beautiful, beautiful quilts that are in the Museum of Modern Art, and they're in other museums all around the world. And there I was in Gee's Bend with all of this gorgeous beauty hanging around me, and I didn't have enough good sense back in those days to get me one of those quilts. But the people there were so incredibly generous, incredible. I mean, we go in different parts of the county, and we had to be surreptitious in many cases because the whites were not pleased to see us talking to workers in the cotton fields and places, as you might well imagine. And they drove around with their pickup trucks with the shotguns in the back. And so that was not a very welcoming sight. And the people of the county, the Black people there, would make sure we were back home safe and sound. And they usually come over and say, and we saved a hot meal for you. And some of the best food that I have ever had was on those plates in those hot meals. And to this day, I can sort of taste it in my mouth when I mention it. But we then were working, the purpose of our work there in Lowndes County was to really get out the vote. In 1964 in Mississippi, the people there they've been disappointed. Fannie Lou Hamer, you probably have heard of her speech at the Mississippi Freedom, when the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party spoke at the National Democratic Party conference in Atlanta. And now we're talking about a time when the Democrats of the South, that was the Dixiecrats. That was the Dixiecrats. And that you had the whole thing of the Southern strategy and everything coming. So it was a time when it was just awful. And that Fannie Lou Hamer, they wanted to be seated as the official delegation for Mississippi. And Lyndon Johnson said, nope, nope, nope. We'll give you a compromise. Two people can take a seat somewhere, but you're not going, this is not going to be official. And so the question, people came out of that feeling burned by having worked so hard to participate fully, to register so many African Americans throughout the state of Mississippi, to participate so fully in the democratic process, and then be denied greater participation. So when SNCC was invited in Selma and in Lowndes County in Alabama to work on voting rights, because African American people wanted to vote. We have always wanted to be full participants in our society. And when people said, well, what good is the vote though? Then we began to search for answers. And one of the best answers that SNCC came up with at that time in the mid-60s was that in Alabama, you could register as an independent political party. You didn't have to be affiliated with the National Democratic or Republican Party. So in Lowndes County, the Lowndes County Freedom Organization was started by the Lowndes County Human Rights Group. And this was a group of people led by men and women, the Moorers, the Hewletts, and other people there in Lowndes County, which is right between Selma and Montgomery. Lowndes County came to prominence in many ways for many people because the march went through it, went from Selma to Montgomery. And so because of that, people then knew exactly where it was. And very tragically, then Viola Liuzzo, who was one of the participants in the march there, was killed in Lowndes County, was shot and killed by the Klan in Lowndes County. Lowndes had an awful reputation. It had been such a violent place for decades that its nickname was Lowndes, Bloody Lowndes. But John Hewlett and Sidney Logan, Alice Mora, a number of other people said, no, we want to vote. We want the vote. They formed their organization and they asked if we would come and help register people to vote. And so that's what I did. I spent months doing precisely that. One of my, if I have like a small claim to fame, so to speak, in some ways, is that I was an amateur artist, and that I would draw when I was a child. When I just drew. I never studied art formally, but I just drew for the fun of it. And so in drawing things, I sometimes would ask me to illustrate something, which I would do. And so in SNCC, in Lowndes County, we needed to put up posters, we needed to put up banners and things to promote the Lowndes County Freedom Organization. Because of the high rate of illiteracy at that time among all people, Black and white, in that part of Alabama, people used symbols. They used icons to represent the political parties. The symbol for the Democratic Party in Lowndes County, for the white Democratic Party, was white supremacy for the right, and it had a white rooster as its symbol. John Hewlett and some of the other people said, we need a symbol, but we need a mean black cat to run that white rooster out of this county. And so we started asking about, now, where could we get a black cat? And one of our SNCC members, Ruth Howard, in Atlanta, saw the Clark College pouncing Panther for the football team there and sent us a drawing. So I started tracing that and reproducing that little pouncing Black Panther that originally came from Clark College. I then put it on the ballots. We needed to tell people, in order to be safe, make sure that after you voted, you go home. Don't hang out in Hayneville, because they kill people there. They will shoot you, they will kill you. Jonathan Daniels was killed there. One of our Tuskegee students and classmates almost lost her life. Ruby Sales almost lost her life there. We said, don't stay in Haynesville, vote and go home. So I said, well, the best way to get that message out would be to make billboards. If we could make billboards, something really big, we could get the message out. And they said, how are we going to do? I said, well, I can draw them if we get them. They won't be pretty, but I can make them. The guys got some lumber together, and I spent a couple of days drawing billboards, which were placed on the land that was owned by some of the Black families in Lowndes County in prominent locations along Highway 80 and other places to get that message out. But the sign, we said, vote for the Black Panther and then go home. And vote for the Black Panther. And so that became then the sort of slogan. And the Black Panther, when the New York Times did a piece, some other people did a piece, and some of the young activists in California, in Philadelphia, and in other parts of the country began to hear about these brave people in Lowndes County who were defying racism to get out there and vote in this Lowndes, bloody Lowndes. Some of them came down. They came from the Deacons for Defense and other places, and they came with their guns. And so they were coming to protect us, but we began to feel like, oh my goodness, what could this escalate into? So sometimes we'd get a little, because we felt protected, because while we were the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, I want you to know that whether it was Lowndes County, Macon County, Bullock, Wilcox, Black people were hunting people as well. And they had their guns, and they had guns in their homes for self-defense. And they were prepared to defend themselves, and they would defend us. They were not aggressive and they were not violent, but they had their weapons to defend themselves. So, but when these young people came down, we began to worry. But there's a photo that's sort of gone viral, which is a young man standing there with his gun protecting one of my billboards. And but later, that name, the Black Panther Party, began to take off. And Huey Newton and Eldridge Cleaver and the people in California with their breakfast programs and other programs, they took up the name, the Black Panther Party. And they were doing it partly in homage to the people in Lowndes County. And of course, it's just gone on to have its own life. And so now it's gone on to Wakanda. So it's quite interesting to see how culture and things change in that way. Now I'd like to just shift gears because I know our time is limited. I'd like to shift gears. Before I do that, I want to talk about today and about something that we're doing and something that I want to hear about what you're planning to do because I think they may have a real close relationship. But please let me know. Oh, there's the Lowndes, there's that Black Panther. And that's the building. That's me standing there with my afro in front of the building. That was our headquarters. Thank you, Guy, for sharing that. So what we're doing now is we are trying to make sure that we are passing on these stories to a younger generation. And we think this is so incredibly important right now, too, because there are so many people who want to erase history. And I think that if we are left with anything as human beings, we must have truth and we must have beauty. And we can't let the truth be eradicated. Can't let the truth, none of us, Black, white, Latino, Native American, none of us can live without knowing the true story of this planet that we're on. We must know the history in order to move forward in a meaningful way. So with this in mind, we, the veterans of SNCC, many of us are in our 70s and 80s now, and that we decided that what we could do is to make sure that our stories don't get lost and are told accurately. So we started a project called the SNCC Legacy Project, and we started working, we worked with Shaw University, North Carolina, Central University, and we found a real home in the Rubenstein libraries at Duke University in North Carolina. And that we have there a repository of documents and materials, and we've created several websites, and we called it the digital media platform of SNCC, and that we are continuing to build that. And what we've done now is to expand that out to include the stories of Black Lives Matter, the BYP 100, all of the young people who are very active in this time period. And it's really fascinating because of the way that things have changed. In our time, we were happy when we could get a mimeograph machine. I'm doing this motion because you'd have to roll the paper out through the machine to make a copy. But nowadays, people, what? I sent out a tweet and it got 20 million people, So, but then the question becomes now, how do you preserve and record a tweet? And which tweets should be preserved? And how will the technology change in the future years to preserve that material in digital forms and in other forms that may come after that technology? So that's really important. Diane Kinney was mentioning that I worked at WHUT. I was the general manager at Howard University Television Station. And I went there because the station was still on the old analog technology, and that it was so important to me that the station and all the valuable history of Howard that had been recorded through that station never be lost because it wasn't in the next technology. And I wanted to make sure that it would be moving into that digital future. And so I pledged then, back at that time in the early 2000s, to help raise the money to make sure we got across that digital line. And the station did. So it exists today in digital format and its programs are being broadcast out into the world. Now, with the stories of Greenwood, what are your goals? What the stories of Tuskegee, the stories that each of you in this room have experienced. What are the stories that you hope to tell? How do you want to tell them? And how can I be helpful to you?
Wow. So let me just say that I am just bursting at the seams with just gratitude, Jennifer. As you talked, so many things came to my mind, and I'm going to open up the floor in just a minute. But some of the things that came to my mind are, you mentioned Bob Moses, who I knew, and he was here in the 50th commemoration of Sammy's leaving us, and that was the last time I saw him. You mentioned Ruby Sales, whose nephew is married to my daughter. Just so many things that you said brought back so many memories. That Friday sitting in my fourth grade classroom and hearing the news that our president, that was a life-altering moment for me. But I think of everything that you spoke about, and people on this call that really know me know that for many years, I have been working to try to put a memorial that is worthy of the life of Sammy Young in this community. When I ran the Techno House for the 21st Century Youth Leadership Movement downtown Tuskegee, we named it, the young people had learned Sammy's story, and we named it in his honor. And it was there for 3 years under a Ford Foundation grant. But right now we are working diligently to raise the funds to transform a small piece of land here in the village of Greenwood into a park in Sammy's honor and memory. So that's one of the things that I am committed to, and one of the stories that I am committed to telling for posterity. I'm going to take a point of personal privilege, because what is very important in this process of revitalization is that we have what I have called the Tuskegee diaspora as the wind beneath our wings. And I want to acknowledge two people on this call that were big girls when I was growing up in the village of Greenwood, and that's Scott Higgins Naylor, who's here, and Charlene Strong Weaver is on the call. Her picture's not up, but I just want to acknowledge them. They don't live here anymore, but they are always a part of the village of Greenwood. So I want to open the floor up and give people an opportunity to respond to Jennifer's presentation and to her question. And so you can raise your hand by going to the reaction button, and I will acknowledge you in the order that I see your hand. Okay, Bobby Beavers from our South Berwick family.
Well, she asked what some of our history was, and thank you very much, Jennifer, for sharing that history, which was fabulous to hear. I mean, it was hard to hear, but it was good to hear. And but what I remember most is the week that Guy Trammell came up to South Berwick to teach about civil rights to all 5 of our school district schools, from grade school low to through high school, and how well received it was by the students and faculty here, and how much we appreciate that he did that. And anyway, and of course I have fond memories of my visit to Tuskegee, and I'm not sure at 80 whether I'll get there again, but I remember it. That's all I can think of right now.
Thank you so much, Bobby, and we're glad that you all are here with us sharing in this moment. All right, who's next? We have about 10 more minutes. Okay, I saw a hand somewhere. Let me go back to the other screen. All right, Miss Dorothy Naylor, you're up. Unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you now.
I grew up in Tuskegee. Some of you I know, and some of you I do not know. Some of you I went to school with. I see Helen.
Yep.
And I lived
Helen
on the
Harrington
same
is
street
here.
with Lucinia. And Norma and her sister were like my little sisters, okay? And I watched them grow up and become just fine model citizens, and it just brings back so many memories, you know, of our days in Tuskegee. And I would like to say that I was just delighted to hear what you had to say, Jennifer. There's so much history and some of the things that I had forgotten. And then it also reminded me of my aunt, because you know what the young people were doing, the elder people didn't necessarily approve of that. You know, it was just totally beyond their concept, you know. And when you talked about SNCC, and my aunt has so many bad things to say. And you know, I'm so glad that those types of things did not stop us. You know, I was at Fisk University at the time when most of this was going on, and then when the assassinations occurred. I had gotten my first part-time job at Fisk. I was a math proctor, and when it happened, I was just stunned, because I just wasn't prepared for the deaths and the violence. I really wasn't. But through it all, you know, I know that it was worthwhile. And my current concern is that Tuskegee be restored to its former prosperity. And I'm wondering, are we going after some of those government dollars that we have struggled and paid taxes, and a lot of it's going overseas? You know, have we done anything to try to get some of the money that's set aside for infrastructure? Because I see a really extreme need for that kind of funding, you know, because I'm having grown up in the 50s and the 60s here in Tuskegee, it just pains me to see where we are now. And you know, I've shed tears over it, and I don't know what is gonna happen. I see people who are willing to work, and I'm hoping that's what's going to happen, and that we're going to move forward, and with a lot of prayer, because you know it took a lot of prayer in the civil rights days. And it just, you know, it's up in the air for me, but I'm still hopeful, and I pray that we will survive, and that we will move forward to the former prosperity that we had.
That is my hope too, Dot, and I'm doing everything I can to make sure that that happens in my lifetime. So we have some exciting things that we are working on that we'll share publicly in a little bit, but we are working very hard to make sure that we revitalize and restore this beloved community. Charlene Strong Weaver, your hand is up, and I'm so happy to see you here on the call. It's another one of the big girls that lived in the village of Greenwood when I was growing up.
That's correct. And what a wonderful hour we have all spent together. And and here again, showing you those that I really know, to Dot Higgins, thank you so much for your words. I agree with you 100%. I also see Helen Howard. We lived in the same block, and my kindergarten through college friend, Barbara Harrington. This again is absolutely wonderful. I remember the night that Sammy was murdered. I was home for a couple of hours, and all of a sudden I heard this screaming, and it was his brother Stevie. They had just received the word, and Stevie came out and was just on the steps screaming and screaming and screaming. It's a case that I will never, never forget. I'm going to be very short. I'm now living in New York. a whole different lifestyle that Tuskegee set me up for. I love Tuskegee. Don't know that I'll be back to live in Tuskegee, but certainly back to visit. And let's stay in touch as a group. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here, Charlene. Helen Howard.
Thank you. Charlene is right. Her backyard and my backyard, her fence and my fence on my property were right there with each other. And I'm like her. I remember that night, and I remember my brother Bill, because they were ace boon coons. You know, in high school, they were just, they were inseparable. I used to go to the back porch and holler in the mornings, Sammy, Bill said, come on out the door. He coming down the street. You know, and I was thinking, what am I gonna do? You know, he's gone. And you're right, it was so sad. Our community, it was just, you know, it just exploded. And when you think about the other activities that took place when they had the trial and the verdict came down, and, you know, our community had to live with the fact that they turned the man loose. And I remember being on the campus in the Logan Hall, and they talking about, we going to Opelika, let's get our cars together. I was sitting up there and I was talking out loud. I didn't know anybody was listening, because I was saying, Opelika, and it's nighttime. You be sitting ducks in the daytime. What you think you're gonna be at nighttime? You know, I guess I really can't go with you there, but we ended up marching downtown, and the statue that everybody is talking about, it got painted. And you know, that was the extent of what we did that night, but it was still a night and days and weeks that will be imprinted in our minds forever. I know Lucinia and Barbara and Charlene and Lord have mercy, how many others. We just, it comes back every time we think about it, and every time somebody mentions it. And I don't pass the service station and the bus station that it doesn't come to mind. And if we think about other towns and what's been going on, every time a young person is shot down by a policeman or somebody else, and I think about it, it just comes back, and I say, you know, we still have a lot of work to go do. It's just like Dorothy said. I see Elise Torbett. She's a young person working in our community, and I'm so happy to know that she has decided to stay at home and use her talents to help us older people stick to the task of doing the things that we know we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. And Elisa's hand is up, so I'm going to get her next. And if you all can give us 5 minutes grace, we'll take one more call person after Elise, and then we'll wrap up. Okay, Elise, we want to welcome you.
Thank you. I'm Elise Tober, and I'm just so deeply blessed by this call, by your story and what you've shared, and how you contextualize it in history and the transition of history. And I think that it's so important that we know who we are. And what your story reminds me is just of the spirit of who people from Tuskegee and who come through Tuskegee, who we are and what we're capable of. And as I think, so my best friend and I last year, we started 2021, it's been 2 years now. We started an organization called the Macon County Youth Council, because I genuinely believe that we are also in a unique period in which we now have to redefine ourselves, engage others, and have people tap into their own power to create their own future and realities. But I would love for more younger people who are concerned about just more younger people to hear the story that you told and the stories that this series plans to tell. I shared this about 80 people right before the call, but it's kind of last minute. Nonetheless, I would love for more people to hear, because I think these types of stories, stories and realities inspire how we organize and engage going forward. So thank you. And thank you all for organizing this.
Thank you, Elise. And we have 2 hands up. If you all can spend a few more minutes with us, we're going to go to Lou and then David.
Madam Chair, could you add me for 30 seconds?
And Dr. Harrington.
Hello,
Okay,
everybody.
so Lou.
This is Lucinia Dunn. And I want to say to you, Jennifer, that was absolutely excellent. You brought back so many memories, people's names I had forgotten. I graduated from Fisk University on purpose, because I did not want to go to the university at home. I'd been spending a whole lot of time from 1st grade all the way through 12th grade being involved in the campus, and some of the students were friends of ours, or they were our student teachers. And so I needed a break. So I went to Fisk University. I was back at home in graduate school under the direction of P.B. Phillips, who really opened the door for me in terms of what my life's work has become. And it was just delightful to hear Dorothy and Charlene. Where have you been? We have not seen you in I don't know when. But it is just absolutely lovely to hear your voice again, because you and my sister were very, very close friends back in the day. In fact, I think you all were classmates. But I want to say that it has been a pleasure working to revitalize Greenwood. And, that's the beginning. Greenwood is the beginning. Greenwood is part of Tuskegee University. And we cannot forget that, because had it not been for Booker T. Washington, Greenwood and Charles Green, the Green would not exist. There was a happy, wonderful childhood that we spent walking the streets on our way to either Chandler's Children's House, Lewis Adams, or Joseph, the St. Joseph Catholic School, feeling safe and secure. I mean, what can you say? That was just a wonderful, wonderful thing. And sometimes when I tell the story to people about Greenwood, they look at me like I have lost my mind and it couldn't be true. I must be making all of this up. But
That's
you
the truth.
see, we were part of a miracle in a community, meaning a nation that really did not respect our people. Booker T. Washington helped to rearrange that, not only for Greenwood and Tuskegee, but for other Black communities throughout the United States. And it is important that we preserve those communities. Now, Jennifer raised the question, and I'm going to answer that question. We need money to do Sammy Young's Park. We have a wonderful Tuskegee architect who is working with us, and we have now applied for a grant for the construction and design of Sammy Young Park. The city gave it to Tuskegee-Macon County Community Foundation, of which I serve as president. Secondly, Sammy Young's house is for sale. We need to buy that house because that's a very important part of our story. It's right down the street from Charlene's house,
Me?
Yes, absolutely. And so we've got to say that little area is getting to look weird, and we gotta change that. So we've got plans. We don't have any money. So if we can begin to have now, TMCCF, Tuskegee-Macon County Community Foundation, has already set up a Tuskegee Diaspora Fund. So we can send, to you the information to make those donations. And we would appreciate it if you all would, spread the word. there are other people who are not only from Tuskegee, but people who love Tuskegee. Our sister city, I've met some of you when you came down to Tuskegee. I am so grateful for your involvement, and we hope that you will continue to be our sisters and brothers, and that we can continue to collaborate in ways that are going to be for the good of our community. Now, last thing, you're right, Dorothy. It's frightening to think that if we're not careful, we will lose what we were part of growing up. I'm going to go back. It's about money. We are steady looking at grants to see if we can have grants to help us do what's needed. And so we would, if you all wouldn't mind, if you identify foundation or federal grants that we can utilize, please send them to Guy, and Guy will get them to us, and we will apply for those grants. So this night, this evening has been so special. I almost feel like crying, because it's not only a coming together of us, but it is also a reminder of how important our students at Tuskegee Institute at that time were to the civil rights movement. Thank you, Jennifer, for what you've done, what you have become, and the fact that you've come back home to tell us the story so that we will not forget those words. In fact, y'all know this is being recorded. I don't know what Guy has in mind, because you know he always has something special in mind. But we will have it for whatever is coming in front of us. I don't know, Norma, if it's appropriate for us to talk about the fact that Dr. Harrington, Guy Trammell, oh my goodness, who am I forgetting? Barbara Dunn Harrington have been working very diligently to make Greenwood an historic site. So please continue to encourage them. Please start writing down your stories. You don't have to make it perfect. We've got people like Diane who can do editing, people like Scooty Ford, Garmin, who can do editing. So send us those stories. And if you need to do it by digital means or whatever, between Michael and Guy and some of the other people that we know, they can make it into what it's supposed to be. I am technologically illiterate, so I don't know what that means.
Okay, well,
Thank you
so
so
you are
much for
right,
allowing me
Dr. Dunn, you are right. There is that committee is in place, and we are moving forward with all due haste to have the village of Greenwood designated as a historic district. So I want to get David's hand, and then our Dr. Harrington, Elaine Harrington, is on the phone, and she is going to have the last word after David McDermott from South Berwick, Maine speaks to us. As soon as he unmutes.
Unmute.
I got it.
There you go.
I'm mostly illiterate too. Listen, I won't take up a lot of time, but Jennifer, I really appreciated the history and the story you were telling, and what you were telling that I'm of the same generation, graduated in '64 from high school, and but I was husband in a northern city at the time, and I couldn't help but reflect on what me and my classmates were thinking and doing while so many of you were going to war, basically. And, you know, we were watching this stuff on television, and we were, you know, some people were making excuses. Well, you know, the law is the law, you know, and they're breaking the law. And there, you know, there was this whole kind of fear, but rationalization about the whole thing among, you know, we were segregated, you know, what did we know? The white kids that I went to school with. And so it's so important that the history that you're doing and that we hear it firsthand and see it firsthand. And I think that's why I really value our sister city relationship, because I know people in South Berwick are hearing from people who have lived it, and it makes it real, it makes it important. So thank you, and best of luck. We'll certainly follow this project to the end.
Thank you, David. And this will not be the last time you will hear from Jennifer. We promise to have her back again and again and again. Dr. Elaine Harrington.
Thank you very much. I guess I'm the oldest on the call, so I'll bring up the rear. Let me say that this is very, very encouraging what is happening tonight. I came back home for something like this to happen. Jennifer, I'm not mobile like I used to be, but there's nothing wrong with my mind and spirit. Young people, we've got to get you on board with us. We must have you. And whatever finances I have, you can count on that to support you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Harrington. I am going to ask Guy Trammell if he will officially close us out. Someone please save the chat. I know that Amy put some links in there to some resources. So make sure you someone save the chat. And I'm going to ask Guy if he will have last words. And I just want to thank you, Guy, for allowing me to moderate this evening's conversation. It has been my extreme pleasure and delight.
Okay, well, it's been an incredible evening. Thank every one of you for being out and everything. And definitely, and Nina, we're gonna have to get together about doing some digitization of all this history too. Everyone, I want to speak to each one online. But again, thank you for making this incredible for the beginning. The Voices of Greenwood, there are a lot more voices to come. Some of them will be just on site, so it won't be able to interact and everything. But this is the beginning, and Jennifer definitely, and probably will be, I'll probably be tapping you about some of the expertise you have in the media also. But thank you so much, and let's keep this going. Thank you.
Just one more thing, and that is that I would like to just end by saying that each of you has a story. And when you were talking about Greenwood, I grew up in my own Greenwood. And I know that South Berwick is a Greenwood in its own way. And these are the stories of America. These stories are so important. And you don't have to even write them nowadays. You can take your iPhone. I see all of these iPhones here. You can take your iPhone and record this. It doesn't have to be long. Just think of what they're doing on TikTok almost. I mean, there is so much power in the media. We have it right in the power of our hands to capture some of these important stories. So please don't let it disappear. And if you find old photos, when you talked about the Sammy Young house, what do you think they'll need in that house to make it like a historic site? They'll need things from that period. And many people are just saying, oh, my grandmother, she had this stuff in here. I can't wait to get rid of it. Let's look at all of this anew now and think about the importance of it in telling the history. And it's so wonderful to see that people like Elise and the other young people who are on this call are getting ready to carry this forward. You've made my day. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you for being here.
And,
All right, so we'll be listening out for the next episode of the Voices of Greenwood, right, Guy?
That's right. That's right. And Zora, tell your friends. Okay. Let's see.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good
Are we
night.
finished? I hate to
Good
be
night.
finished. Yeah. So it
I'm
was
so
interesting.
sorry this is over with.
Me too. It was very interesting. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Will we be able to put it on the local TV channel?
We'll see. Okay.